Hello, and thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. Here's a scene that I just stamped out for the latest challenge for the Stampscapes Facebook 2 group. It was dramatic silhouettes, so I thought kind of to create a scene for me as far as drama went was to utilize the lightning bolts. Lightning bolts have kind of an inherent drama to them, of course, like a stormy night or whatnot. When you hear and see, lightning and thunder in the sky, it tends to be very dramatic. But as I mentioned in this video, you can also just use any of your sky figures, different sky figures, and those ones can, any one of them can be a substitute for that. And just by the very nature of stamping something kind of in a strong silhouette against, a sky background will lend itself to some sort of dramatic composition. So anyways, if you choose to stamp along with me in this video, I hope you have a good time. And if you choose to just watch it, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's have some fun here. The challenge for the Facebook group this month is dramatic silhouettes, and I thought I would do something that's right up my alley in creating drama within a scene. And I'm going to go with a sky figure, and I felt that a bolt of lightning is just about one of the most dramatic things you could place in a sky. It really conveys that a certain type of emotion and kind of power and strength. But that being said, this could be used. This scene could be done with just about any sky figure that we have. There's the Starbirth and Milky Way and different moons and nebula, larger moons, different types of moons and whatnot, okay? And those will all convey, a sense of drama when you put them in the skies, okay? And you do the technique that we're doing. So it's not a whole different scene. You're just working the concept around a different sky figure. Sky figures are all interchangeable. Okay, so that being said, one of the color schemes that I'm thinking about is one of my favorites to do in a scene. I've always loved this type of look, and that's going with kind of a warmer tinged scene in terms of the temperature scale. And I'm going to use some browns, and I'll put some oranges and golden, yellows and whatnot into the scene. All right. Now, the colors that I'm going to stamp my sky figure in, I want it to be dark enough to where when I run in all these other colors that I'm going to use on this scene, the sky figure will still stand out, especially around the bolts. So I want to go with something I would say medium tone to darker. Okay, I'm going to use a dark brown here, and I'll probably use some of the orange and yellow in here. So what you want to do is you'll want to get kind of a nice range of warm tones, okay? A lot of people have distress inks. Let me just show you an example of the type of lineup you'll put together, okay? And you can mix and match as well. And I'll do that here as well, just to show you kind of the different concept and the way you can do it, okay? So here's a mustard seed, potter's clay. We're mixing and matching here. I have a Marvy dark brown, okay? So we're going from light, medium, and darker here. But we also have the distress inks. We have things like tea dye and walnut stain. It's kind of hard to tell which one's a little bit darker than the other. If you can't tell, then that's fine. You just put it anywhere within your range that you're working with. Walnut stain and potter's clay, I'm not really quite sure which one's darker than the other, but if they're fairly close, it doesn't matter. Where you put it within your kind of value range that you're lining up. But I would usually line them up in kind of a, just in general from light to dark, okay? That's a lesson, or a part of the lesson that I always used to do in my classes. I would have them pull out their pads. Now, we were only working with Marvy pads at the time, just because I could travel around with my pads very easily and give everyone that was in the classes a full set of them. But you can see something like this. You can see a nice full range, okay? And you can, you know, I can, you know, put in an orange into the mix or whatnot. So that's just what you're doing with kind of your mix and match range of pads here. You can, you know, we can supplement as well as we go along here. But I would say, you know, 4 colors or something like that minimum. You can use less, but usually when you're doing this type of layered dye-based kind of inking, coloring, the more colors that you happen to have, the potentially richer end result you can end up with, okay? That's not to say you can't use less, but it's just not as kind of deep and saturated at times, okay? And kind of that full range is important there. Okay, so this is something that you don't have to do here, but I'm going to do because I happen to have some pens here. But I'm going to put an extra kind of bit of color into this around the bolts, okay? And hopefully that kind of illuminates them a little bit. Sometimes it's not good to put in too much color that's lighter than, you know, a fairly dark value on my sky figures, especially if you're going to run in a lot of different colors into this impression, because you want those lightning bolts to stand out. So what I'm saying is if I color the area around them yellow, then those lightning bolts really aren't standing out very strong. The reason why they stand out very strong here is because, you know, this indexing is in black only, so there's a lot of contrast there. But I do want a little bit of a value change, so I just added a little bit of that orange into the mix, and you'll notice that I added orange over the dark brown, and yeah, I do get some, you know, polluting of my lighter color with the darker color, but you know, with these pens, I just kind of roll it out, and you can see it had that brown in it, but then, you know, after a few strokes, it's the pure orange again, so I'm not really worried about that. Okay, sky figures. This goes back to one of my first lessons on this YouTube channel, but after you ink it up, one of the things you might want to do, if we're going to run some other images into our sky figure, what I do is I'm about a 1/4 inch into this one. I'm kind of dabbing off the edges so that they stamp lighter. Okay, don't just take a wet paper towel and, you know, wipe it off completely, otherwise you're left with another real firm rectangle again. But I'm just kind of dabbing off. I don't know, it might be a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever. Dabbing off the surrounding area, especially if you're doing this in a dark color, so that when I stamp it out. Now I'm going to stamp this one, I tell you what, let's go landscape on this one. I'm going to stamp this kind of at an angle. And we'll go about like, I'll put this over here. Sometimes putting things at an angle increases, potentially, the drama of a scene, because there's kind of a visual momentum when you do things kind of skewed. You can even do landscapes or all of your imagery, you can do it all kind of skewed, and it gives it this kind of natural motion for the sake of kind of drama. Okay? Alright, so not too bad. You can see where that orange in there kind of came into play. It has a little bit of a different feel to it, doesn't it, than just having it all kind of monochromatic. Alright, so that's one impression. I mean, with something like this, I could come in with another one like that. I would ink up again and, you know, add another impression in here. I'm trying to think if I want to do that. That might be kind of interesting. I think I want to do that. I don't think I've done that before in a composition. I've had 2 lightning bolts, but not in the manner that I'm kind of thinking about. So let's keep things kind of fresh for me. But see, I'm inking it up again because if I went for a second impression, it would come out so light that this one wouldn't blend in with the other impression. So So I'm inking it up again here. Go for something kind of a similar coloring style. Okay. Alright. Orange and brown kind of relate. I don't know if I would do this orange over like a purple or something like that. But the orange and brown do mix together very well. Okay, so these are the Marvy brush markers, by the way. Okay, so blotting off again around the side. I'm not being, you know, careful or gingerly with this. I'm giving it a good dabbing with a dry paper towel, okay? And then let's go in here and let's go in like this. No need to mask off this previous impression. Let's just come in at this in an angle. Now, you notice I didn't even stamp this whole top portion, so I probably didn't need to re-ink all of that, but ink up more than you think you'll need. Okay? So we have this right here. Now we need to fill in around it, so that's the thing that we would be doing with any type of sky figure. No matter what you have, you'll fill in with some additional cloud structuring. At least, you know, at least in as far as this stamp along goes. Doesn't mean you can't just fill in this bottom portion with color, but that would be a, you know, quite a lot to fill in. But if we're going for drama, the thing that I want with these clouds is to be reflecting some of that light that happens when lightning strikes, okay? So my clouds, you notice how they're top lit up here, okay? Now if I had this cloud up here, I would flip it around this way so that it's bottom lit. But I don't have too much space up here, you know, or none for those bottom lit clouds, so everything's going to be top lit from here. Now I don't know if you want to go for something really unusual, which I don't know if it happens out there, but you know, you'd have lightning coming from below or something like. I'm not going to do that though. But same principle on this, okay? Blot off the edge like this. Now right here I'm kind of blotting off that whole dark area right in here, like so. And take this, don't mask any of that off, but don't come in here and stamp like that much over the top of it. Come in about like that, okay? And that there's a ½ inch, quarter inch or something like that of leeway, so it's not some kind of real precarious thing where you have to get a stamp positioner and you're lining up that line with that line. It's not like that at all. I'm probably going to come in 1 inch into this open space, okay, like that. It could be down here, you know what I mean? There's plenty of wiggle room, okay? And that's the way that I design these stamps, so that you don't have to be too tedious or worry about your placement of things. Occasionally there's a stamp or two that where it's more kind of outline in terms of structuring, like a lighthouse, you know, where I don't have, you know, something on each side of it, so that you do have to kind of place it a little bit more carefully. If you have a cloud or something like that right behind the lighthouse, then you'll have to do some really simple masking. But as far as like tedious masks and whatnot, not needed at all. These all blend in with one another. In fact, that's one of the things that's kind of hard to convey when you're when someone sees the end result. They think that, oh my gosh, how did you blend all these? Well, if it's 3 stamps, 4 stamps, 5 stamps using that scene, and they're all blended together where you cannot see where one stamp ends and the other begins, it must be really hard. But in fact, that blending aspect of it is super easy, because it means that you've just run everything in with one another. Every time you re-ink this, just blot it off on a perimeter here. I'm going with the dark brown. Again, it's the dark brown that was used on the lightning. Okay, now see, every time I do this, I'm blotting off the edge, but well, I'm kind of changing the angle slightly, okay? But I'm not flipping this, you know, at a 90-degree angle like this, but I'm going to change the angle, okay, with each impression, okay? Now watch this one. I need to come up into this one. I can come in right here, but it's really symmetrical if I do that like that and like that and like that. Don't think of it as like laying bricks or something like that, where you're going edge to edge, okay? Coming up right here, I'll go a little bit off center from that previous impression, overlapping into it. Blends perfectly that way. And without fuss, too, I should say. So a lot of people, you know, that's the thing that's kind of hard to kind of get across. It's, you know, after they do it once, you know, one impression, they kind of get it. But I've seen it in my workshops, you know, live workshops all the time. It's kind of getting people comfortable with this idea that they can overlap things and kind of break out of that. They're good habits of using kind of more of the outline styles of designs that are, you know, a little bit more time-consuming in terms of the blending of them, okay? You don't want a bunch of outlines and showing up in one another, okay? But these are tonal for the most part. So tonal designs that are designed to be overlapped and blended in with one another. You don't have to worry about all that. Okay, so we have all these clouds running in here. And see how I kind of ran it up into that design? The designs like this have this tapering dot pattern that goes out like that, so that whole space in there is something, it's almost like an inch, you know, of leeway where you can blend in one image into the other one. So there's a full inch, so it's not like, oh my gosh, I need like a really careful positioner to figure it out. You can stamp it here, you can stamp it here, you can stamp it here. That's that big of a space like that, so you know what I mean? If you're using an unmounted stamp where you can't see this right here, well, I think you can figure out, you know what I mean? It's a full inch of wiggle room in there where you can kind of play around with it, and it'll come out exactly the same as something like this. All right? Okay, so in terms of the blending aspect of it, okay, so we're going to start off with our lightest colors, and with whatever kind of color applicator, ink applicator you're using, go ahead and get that ready. Okay, I'm kind of drying off my stylus tools right here. I just wash them all off. When you use these things, that's why we sell them in 3-packs, you know, the wands. But that's why I sell them in a pack of 5 of these wands, 10 sides, so you can kind of save one color for each color family, because these really hold a lot of ink. When you ink a sponge applicator up, you're in a sense changing or you know, making that tip into an ink pad of sorts, right? Because it's ink held in a, you know, sponge reservoir there. Okay, let's go with our lightest tones. So we're going with the mustard seed. I think this mustard seed is pretty bright, okay? But now here's the thing that you're going to want to do. We're going to run, this is our lightest color that we'll be using in here, but we do want to retain some of the lighter aspects of these clouds right here, okay? So watch what I do here before you start off. I'm coming in here from the outside in, okay? Like this. But now notice where I will retain some of the lighter areas of my clouds, okay? So see, here's a cloud right here, and here's the other impression of it right there. Now see, I'll come into the darker area of that impression up above and ink some of that in. So it kind of creates a little bit of layers, or layering of imagery like that. See that? Where some of it is lighter down here, where it's kind of capturing some of that light. And what we're essentially doing with this is we are kind of defining light, or further defining light, through the use of shadow, okay? The images themselves already have shadows drawn into them, so the darker areas of these designs, I'm just going to kind of make a little bit darker, okay? But just in general, these lightning bolts or lightning in the sky, whenever that you know, it strikes, barring some kind of artificial light, you know, that would be in some environment, the lightning is really going to be the brightest thing in the scene. The lightest thing, I should say, not brightest. So, as I do this toning, I'm being careful not to tone out my lightning bolts, okay? I'm going to leave those white. For the most part, I'm not being real careful. I am getting some yellows into some of it, okay? Just so that it's not completely void of some of this color. But what you want to do is you want to retain some of the lighter aspects of this composition. I'm not leaving too much light, but see this right here? And then what that ends up being is it's like light reflecting off that white, blinding white light, which it'll end up being. And it's reflecting off some of the clouds. Which clouds do remain light and dark? Doesn't matter. Just as long as you kind of oscillate it, okay? Leave some of it and just go in with the rest of it. Now this pad right here is really juicy, so I have a lot of ink on it. I don't think I've even re-inked a single time, right? I'm just using that one inking of that, and that took me this whole way, okay? If you go like this, you can see that not very much is coming off, but if I add more and more and more, right, I get a full saturation of it. So don't re-ink so often, just kind of use repetition, unless your pad's dry and you really need to, nothing's coming off of it at all. So I can kind of get more intense and darker using this existing yellow. Now, this yellow is not going to be the thing that gets things dark, because no matter how, if I tap this a million times, it's not going to get any darker than that, because it's reached its full saturation. So try to tap off your pad until an area reaches its full saturation in what will end up being the darkest areas. Now, the darkest areas of the scene, for me, are going to be the perimeter for the most part. Okay? Alright, let's switch up to... Tea-dye, I know, it's a really light color, and we're not going to be able to see it at all. So I'm going to go ahead and use this Walnut Stain. I'm just using the same tip right here, okay? Will some of this yellow get in here? I don't think so, because I tapped most of it off where it was mostly dry, and this pad is going to be moister than this, and plus, if some gets in there, it doesn't really matter. Okay, now see that change of hue right there? That's what we want. And now when you get into your darker colors, now don't tone everything out at this point in time, or with any of the ensuing colors, okay? Just kind of add that in generally in the area that you use some yellow. Maybe you leave some of the yellow just pure and don't go over it. Okay? See how that's kind of changing it there? This color, this Walnut Stain color, just by itself looks like that. But look how much, deeper and more saturated it looks over the top of another color. It's a color that merges well with it, okay? Because yellow is a part of brown, okay? So this I'm kind of going around the whole entire perimeter. Just turn your card, to tap your color on in a nice ergonomic motion. To get a full saturation, I'm staying in an area too, like this, like that, okay? In other words, this is the technique that a lot of people want to use. They go like this. You know what I mean? That's not what you want to do, otherwise you're going to get like these shapes everywhere like that. Okay? You want to condense your tapping so that you can get kind of a nice full range of, that hue in that given area. Okay? And don't worry, it's not going to take forever. The most coverage that we're going to do is with the lightest tone. And that yellow didn't take for, a long time. Okay, so just kind of blending it in like this. That's why I never see any of my shapes of my sponge. I'm going to use terrible technique here just to make a point. Okay, I'm going to go like that. Okay, but since I've achieved a full saturation of that previous color, that color just blends right out. I can go like this. Okay. And I see that kind of football, that oval shape, but it'll blend right out, provided I used enough of the previous color, okay? Now don't do that though, really strong impression of it. We're just kind of dabbing like this. Okay, so that is that. Let's move into kind of a more potentially dramatic color. Let's go to this orange here. It's a reddish orange. Let's take a look at that. Yeah. It's just kind of an incrementally darker tone. I didn't know how bright that was going to be. And this pad is pretty juicy. But you can see the change in hue there. See the difference between that color and this color? With orange, without orange. Now, you can oscillate it now, too. You don't have to put every color everywhere. We can have a little bit of orange somewhere and leave some of it just, you know, the brown and yellow or whatnot. You can do something like that. I like that orange in there, though. I like that, kind of that tone. And I especially like the depth of that color that's providing or adding to. Okay, so I've tapped this around a little bit. I can kind of come into these areas like this and add a very light, pale version of it. Or if I tap more, then I can add a deeper one. Okay. It looks really bright and deep from that scene. Okay, let me see here. One of the things about Marvy pads, too, if you have them, is they can potentially get a little bit brighter. They're some of the brightest inks out there on the market, okay? Let me try this orange right here from Marvy. It's the same orange that I used in pen form on the lightning image, okay? Yeah, see how bright that is right there? Boy, that pad is super juicy too, so I have to be careful. Careful that I don't just kind of over color everything with it, because now this is, there's like, I'm laying down like a slathering of that, so I'm kind of staying kind of right around on the perimeter here before I take it in. See how deep that looks right there in terms of that color scheme? In terms of the intensity scheme, too. Don't worry about it if yours isn't applying as kind of thick layers fully as mine. Just keep kind of working it. We're going to add more imagery over the top of this, so anything that's happening, let's say your cloud didn't blend in well, you know, right over there or something like that, don't worry about it. But I am going in now with the color that I stamped my cloud out in, which is that dark brown. And we're blending this in as well. So whatever color you stamp out your imagery in, when you get to the toning and coloring process, that's usually the color that will start blending everything in together. Okay. A lot of times I use black, you know, in some imagery, so I have to go through the entire spectrum to get to black, and that black really starts to kind of unify things even more. The other colors kind of give you the glow and the saturation. But as far as kind of the unification of everything blended together just fine in the impressions, but utilizing that same hue that you stamped everything out in usually is kind of the final kind of step that will really unify things even more. Now, one of the things I haven't done yet is I haven't stamped my imagery, so I'm going to stamp that, you know, this is supposed to be silhouettes. So that means, you know, things that are just dark and black. Well, it doesn't have to be black, but, you know, typically it's dark, because things are usually backlit in silhouettes, right? But that I like to kind of keep for the end. I like to position my things after I kind of know what's going on here. That's why I often keep my foreground, and you know, as the last thing that I do. And I'll stamp that in black. So I tell you what, I am going to go all the way to black. This is bottle green here. Here's black. And I'll put that on my corners like this. The darker you make some area of your scene, the lighter, the lightest areas are going to seem by contrast, okay? Well, if you add a darker tone, then everything that's lighter than that will seem lighter by contrast, but when you get to black, you know, it's pretty much the final color that you can add that will be visible. I can't go back and add a yellow over the top of black and have it look yellow or something like that. Okay, these are transparent colors that we're using. Okay, I especially like to use these in my four corners to really kind of contain my imagery and to create a nice vignette and to kind of create a framing around my entire composition. All right, so it's getting kind of interesting. Like you get around here, you can see it's like an abstract or something. Okay, so let's take our eagle. I have this eagle right here, and I have a smaller one here. I think I'm going to use the two of them together. Okay. And we're going to stamp this out in black. Would this eagle be flying during a big storm? Well, maybe not, but I don't know if I'm necessarily making a natural statement. I'm just trying to create kind of the most dramatic scene that I can using this imagery. Okay, I can put it this way, I can put it this way. I think right here looks pretty good though. And here goes the silhouette aspect. You have to kind of hold this down a little bit longer because we have so much ink that we've laid down on our scene, on our paper, that you don't want this impression to be like a rubber, to be like a vacuum where you pull it off, and because everything is wet underneath, it kind of vacuums off the ink. So I'm just holding this down just long enough for the ink to transfer fully. I mean, we're not talking a really long time, but hold it down long enough, okay? So that we have our eagle in there, like so. Let's see if I want this one in here too. Here's another one. I thought that would be kind of interesting out here in the distance, or I can have it down here too, kind of in that lighter area, like so. Kind of things in flight are kind of inherently dramatic in some ways. Okay, so I have a couple different birds in there. It's like there's kind of circling up or something like that. It could be kind of a time narrative where maybe that represents, you know, the eagle at one point in time. That one in the distance could be, you know, a few seconds later or something like that. Or they just could be, you know, flying around together. Okay, now let's add in some additional imagery to make our subjects in here even more dramatic and to create additional space within this card. Okay, I'm going to use a Versafine for this. I'm going to be stamping something that represents something a lot closer to us, okay? Meaning these this tree, the leaves stamp. Okay, the Versafine is a pigment ink, and it's a black pigment ink. And let me do something on this first. Okay, let's hold up on this one. Let's add a little bit of a kind of dramatic lighting to this. Well, it's softer lighting. It's already kind of a dramatic scene. But let's add a little bit of pigment ink, Hero Hues, to a Q-tip. I've already pre-frayed this because I've already used this one once. Okay, here's my kind of unfrayed tip. Now this one right here, you can see it's bigger. I've just kind of unfrayed the tip like this. I've kind of loosened it up. Alright. And then I've kind of patted it down a little bit. You have to kind of fray it, or undo the, you know, see how it's getting kind of bigger like this? That's a good technique right there. I need to remember that. And then just kind of pat it down so you have kind of a flatter surface to work with, okay? So nice and soft for a soft application. Alright. I'm going to take this ink now. I'll put a little bit on the top or whatever, but in reality I probably have a lot of it. Okay, it's a good thing I didn't switch this paper out because see, that's a big ball of ink right there. I don't want that. Just keep tapping it off where it's kind of more of a softer look. Okay, see that right there? Where there's barely anything. Kind of watch out, make sure there's none kind of around the perimeter there. Alright, now, in our lightning right in here, let's make that kind of illuminate. Okay, there's this bolt of lightning that's striking, and it's kind of illuminating all of the moisture around it. Okay, so look at that. Doesn't that strike look, I don't know, kind of more dramatic? Lightly tap now. You don't want these big balls of ink. Okay, now if you get a big ball of ink, don't get shocked. You know, just take a paper towel or your finger and just dab it right off, and it'll come right off. Okay, especially on the glossy cardstock. So here's that. See, doesn't that look like it's illuminated now? Let's look at the difference between this one and this one. It's different. I won't do it on every one of these little bolts, but yeah, kind of just in general. Like the largest one, I'll have it on there, but look at that. Okay, so we'll do the same thing on this one right here. This is the larger of the bolts with a second impression. Looks like it's glowing, I think. Okay, there we have it. Now, on these areas around in the clouds, where we've retained a little bit of that white of the paper, you can kind of dab on some onto those areas. It'll kind of carry out that same texture that's up here into some of these other areas, okay? You don't just put too much, you can just put a little bit. I didn't retain a lot of the whites down in these areas, so there isn't a whole lot of area that I can kind of add it to that where it would kind of make sense. Makes sense from the standpoint of that's the white of the paper up there, so there's this white light, and it's, you know, the reflection of that lighting would be the same as whatever color that is up there. So in other words, if I've toned in everything with yellow, then having this kind of white ink addition would look out of place usually, okay? Because it has to be the same light that's reflecting off what this is supposed to be moisture down here. So reflections of whatever light, colored light you are using would be the same as the source. Okay, so there we have that. See those bolts up there? Isn't that fun? Okay, if you used like a, you know, star birth or a moon or something like that, you can put the little additional lighting around that, or around some of these stars in here, some of the larger stars and whatnot. Okay, so let's go back to this. I think it's still juicy enough. I don't think I even need to re-ink. This pigment ink really takes a while to dry, so ink it up just in case. Okay, let me see. Okay, so let's put some nice dramatic... I'm being careful not to stamp over the top of my eagles. I want to see my eagle impressions. You know, we'll go for several impressions of this, okay? But re-ink, you know, not several impressions off of one inking. This time I'm using only about half of the design, maybe a little bit less than half. Using kind of a thicker style of ink and much darker in the form of this Versafine kind of creates a little bit of space even between the foreground and those very dark eagles up there. Okay, I'll come in like, let's come in like so. I'm just going to use a tiny bit of this. Okay. And I'll come over with another one around like so. So hopefully that is a fairly dramatic piece right there. Certainly fun to do. I love using these kind of strong silhouette imagery for drama and this is better on a white piece of paper so you can kind of see it better. I'm looking at this, I'm kind of deciding if I want to add anything more, like some gel pen touches or whatnot. Well, I can test it out. We do have the white from the bolts here. If I want to, this is just a Uniball Signo gel pen. I can add a few little highlights on some of these clouds, okay. I'm adding it onto the top sides of some of these billows, okay. I'm not going to add it down in areas that are too light. I mean, too dark down here, you know, because the contrast between this white dot and the darker area might stand out a little bit too much, but I can put a couple dots on them. Okay, and always kind of in the direction that's kind of facing the our light source, so tops of the billows, because everything was being top lit, and we've configured the cloud like this, where the top of the billows are always facing that light source. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I think that's kind of a good overall texture in there. See, can you see it right there? So it's kind of capturing some of that light. Now we have these branches all over here. These branches are really wet right now, these leaves. So let me try to be somewhat careful about tagging. I'm also have to be careful about touching this, okay? So often I get my fingerprint and I kind of, you know, smear it. It happens to me all the time. But see this? I can put a few little highlights on some of these leaves in the foreground. Sometimes it's better just to leave them alone, but I think in a situation like this is kind of nice. It's kind of creating a relationship between my foreground and my most distant images, the background, you know, the lightning in this case. So it's creating a relationship in that that lightning is striking, and it's casting its light over everything, casting things on the clouds, and now it is reflecting off of the nearest objects within the scene, which are these leaves. Okay, I can, like I said, I can go overboard with these dots too, so I have to be careful. But see, if you just put 2 right there and nothing else, it kind of looks out of place. So I'm, you know, I'll need to match this foreground lighting, you know, with the other areas, just so that it kind of matches in terms of a textural consistency. See that right there? How everything's kind of being illuminated. Okay. So, maybe it's not supposed to be some kind of figurative piece, but more kind of a, I don't know, representational of a strength or something like that. You know, there's power in that lightning bolt, and, you know, these eagles. But I think it makes for a fairly powerful piece. And, yeah, I don't know, maybe dramatic too, having those things kind of skewed and whatnot, and we have these kind of colliding bolt strikes in here. This would be a good thing to kind of frame up. It would be nice to kind of frame this with maybe like a gold or bronze matte, I think, and then throwing this on I don't know, it would probably even go well with like a purple cardstock or something like that. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe a nice gold matte or metallic, and then framed on, you know, matted on, or card formatted onto black. Might be nice, or something like that. So all kinds of possibilities here, but kind of the complementary color, that purple, so it's a little bit intriguing. Maybe it could be used for a matte on there, like a gold and purple matte or something like that. So okay, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this stamp along, if you chose to stamp with me, or I hope you enjoyed it just watching it in terms of the creation of this scene here. So a couple of concepts to remember are one of them would be the kind of the blotting off of the surrounding areas right here for sky imagery for easier blending, and kind of lining up your pads. Now these aren't the ones that I used on here, but just kind of lining them up from light to dark, and that will be your kind of coloring process as far as which ones to start off with in the layering process there. So kind of follow that, and it makes all your blending kind of processes really easy from then. I always do that with myself here. I kind of line things up, and I know what I'm kind of moving into, and I get to know my pads a little bit more from a value standpoint that way too. Okay, thanks for watching, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel.